The Finding Purpose podcast is proudly brought to you by Relive the Moments, founded by visionary entrepreneur John Lim. We live in a world where it's easy to capture memories, but Relive the Moments makes it effortless to re-experience and share them. From NFC-enabled tap coasters and photo frames to interactive video cards, Relive the Moments turns everyday objects into unforgettable tap-to-experience keepsakes. Imagine gifting a wedding guest a coaster that instantly opens your highlight reel, or giving your event sponsors a custom frame that tells your story with just one tap. Whether you're celebrating a milestone, planning a wedding, honoring a legacy, or elevating a brand experience, Relive the Moments is the bridge between the past and present, between memory and connection. It's not just a product, it's an experience. Visit www.relivethemoments.com and use promo code PURPOSE for 25% off your first order. Let's bring your memories to life, one tap at a time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Adam Vora, and I'm so grateful to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring the journeys of incredible individuals, people who have faced adversity, found their purpose, and are now making an impact in their communities. But it's also about my journey. Over the years, I've faced my own obstacles, moments of doubt, and struggles with identity. Through it all, I found my purpose in giving back, creating a space where people can detach from the negative emotions and stigmas they may associate with their own stories, just like I did with mine. Here, we have real conversations about growth, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're searching for direction, striving for personal development, or simply looking for a place to feel seen and understood, this is for you. So if these conversations resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social media. Now let's dive into today's episode.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm Adam, and I'm so grateful you're here. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or watching on the official YouTube channel of the Finding Purpose podcast, thank you for being part of this community. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share your support that truly fuels what we're building here. Last week, we suited up with Dudley Rayborn, the creative force behind Sir Dudley's Bespoke, a conversation about legacy, self-expression, and showing up in the world with intention. Today, we pivot from custom tailoring to digital craftsmanship with John Mendez, a speaker, entrepreneur, and podcaster who's become a standout voice in branding, content creation, and AI strategy. With over 130 speaking engagements in the past year alone, John has shared stages with leaders at Podfest Expo, The Authority, Influence and Profit Summit, and beyond. He's the founder of Stop and Stare Media, where he helps entrepreneurs and their creators repurpose their content with purpose, teaching them how to generate a year's worth of material in under an hour through his signature AI Won't Replace Me framework. John's mission is clear: help others unlock their voice, scale their message, and lead with clarity in a fast-moving digital world. Let's dive into it. Mr. Mendez.
Adam, I'm excited to be here. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad everything is perfect timing. So we're here today. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, man, it has been a long time coming, and I'm sorry that it was such a delay in getting you here. But, at the end of the day, I love your story. I've been super lucky to be involved in speaker schools with you through Warm Heart Life and Brandon Godoris, and I've heard bits and pieces of your story. I know what you do, and obviously I receive your newsletter, which hits my mailbox way too frequently than it should. But regardless, I really just kind of wanted to dive into your personal story because I don't think I've really heard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so where do you want to start?
Start at the beginning.
So in the beginning, there was light. Then John Mendez came out.
There you go.
Out of the light. But I was born in 2001, so I'm turning 24 in a couple months. So I was born here in Stanford, born and raised. My grandma and my grandpa raised me. My Dominican side of the family, so I'm Dominican and Guatemalan. Dominican side raised me. We grew up in the projects, like 8 or 9 of us in a 2-bedroom. And so my bed was like pretty much a couch up until like 3rd or 4th grade. And then I upgraded to like, those spring like fold up beds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I slept on that for a little while. And then not only until I moved to where I live now, still in Stanford, that I actually ever have to like my own bed for me to sleep on. But I shared my room for a little while. So it was not until like 8th grade. So I guess time was hard. Growing up, I never really thought much of it. I was just a kid and some born into that stuff. That was just life. So that was the norm for me. I enjoyed my childhood. Wouldn't want it any other way. And I say growing up, it was something where like I had so many influences in my life just growing up where I grew up. That all kind of accumulated and came together to help me come into who I am. And we can go into more specifics, but that is the general nutshell of, how John Mendez started to form and to come together.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you said early on that your grandparents raised you. Can you show my audience why they took the lead in raising you?
Yeah, so my dad, he was absent growing up. Me and him are cool now, but growing up, we never really talked all that much. And then my mother, she suffers from really bad anxiety and depression. So she was there physically, but not there mentally. So it was hard to understand that growing up. And so even though she lived with me pretty much my entire childhood and up into my high school years, like she was there, but not really there. And so me and her have always had a horrible relationship. And then so grandparents, they stepped up and they ended up raising me. So even though I'm their grandchildren.
On the mom's side or your dad's side?
On mom's side.
Okay.
Yeah, so even though I'm their grandchildren, they pretty much raised me as if I was one of their own.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I've got 2 now. I have a little sister, same mom, different dad.
Okay.
She's 6 years younger than me. So me and her grew up together. And so even though we're like half sisters, whatever, half siblings, that's my sister, bro. And so we grew up together. And then about a year and a half ago, my dad had a little fun. And so now I have another sister. And so she's 1.5. Yeah. So I have another sister now who's 1.5. And then the lady my dad got with has 2 daughters as well. So now I have 1 younger half sister, 6 years younger. I have 2 stepsisters, 1 in high school, 1 in elementary school. And then I got another half sister that is 1.5 now. So yeah, but before that, it was just me and my sister growing up together.
What were some values that your grandparents imparted on you that you noticed at a young age with the way they moved and the way that they chose to lead you that had a lasting impact on your trajectory?
And one of the things that I never understood. So my grandpa, I don't know how long he's been in this country, maybe 40-something years plus, right? Still speaks no English at all. And so whenever we used to walk, we didn't have a car growing up, so we used to walk downtown, he would always see people in passing do that, that universal like head nod, like, and always did. And I was always like embarrassed. I would get secondhand embarrassment being my grandpa. When I was young, and I would ask him like, "Grandpa, like, do you know these people?" He was like, "No, but like, that's just kind of what you do." And like, it's so funny because now, growing up, so many people are just so, especially here in the Northeast, I feel, just whenever people are walking, whenever people are in an event, people avoid eye contact. People, don't wave hi and don't do those little things that I feel like
are friendly.
Friendly gestures that are, are universal. A lot of people don't do anymore, right? And that has really like that charisma, being able to carry yourself that way and confidently walk. My grandpa got a little bit of swagger to him. He was that guy back in his day. I could just tell he was that guy back. He was born and raised in Dominican Republic, so they're from a little village out there. And so you could just tell that my grandpa, he was that guy that would just everyone knew, that everyone loved, kind of like a Brandon Godoris,
Yeah.
And he's a really charismatic dude, and so that was probably like one of the things that, off the top of my head, that really stuck out to me. And like now, it's like I try to carry myself with that same, charisma, that same confidence, and do a little things like sir and ma'am, just little head nods, opening doors, stuff like that. Like kind of were embedded in me at a very early age, and kind of I didn't understand why, but carried out through into my adult years now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like just a good habit to have, just to be nice to people and acknowledge people. More often than not, people invite that. I've never head nodded someone or smiled at someone and, they weren't just like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like usually it was met with a kind gesture in return.
Yeah.
So it's, you talked about like reuniting with your father later. I'm just curious, frankly, how did that happen? And what were the feelings that you had growing up towards your father, and how
Yeah.
did they evolve?
So I didn't really have much memory as to like what I felt. I know my dad was always never there. I have a memory of like an abusive situation and then remember vividly like crying. I don't know how old I was, but I had to be like stupid young.
Yeah.
And from there, I ended up going back to my grandparents' house. I lived with my dad for maybe like a month or two. But aside from that, that was pretty much it. And, my grandparents like never really rocked with my dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really see him all that much growing up. I was seeing him maybe like I could count on one hand each year the amount of time I've seen him. Usually like Christmas, my birthday, maybe one or twice here and there. But aside from that, I never really seen him much growing up. He also had his own issues that he was going through, drinking, partying, all that stuff. He had me young. He had me at 20.
Mm.
And he came to this country at 17. And so like, he came from a different world to a country where he didn't know the language. And within 3 years, already got a girl knocked up, my mom, and had a baby right after 20. And so like he was still a kid trying to figure himself out, trying to figure out this whole country and dealing with all that stuff while I was a little baby, right? Just so happened that he was being a big drunk idiot for a while before he got his life together, and he worked, and eventually he got into like an opportunity where his landscaping boss or whatever offered him an opportunity to own a company. And so they ended up working something out, and he ended up then taking ownership. And, now he has a successful landscaping company here in CT, based out of here in Stanford. But like how me and him started to get cool is around like high school time, like closer to senior year, as I was going into college, me and him started to reconnect a little bit. And he ended up giving me like a going away gift. I'm pretty sure he bought me my laptop when I went away to college. And that's kind of how I seen my dad. He would just get me gifts every now and then, like a pair of sneakers here or there. And that was really it. There was never any actual relationship there.
Like an emotional connection. Or
yeah, from that what I remember. I also have a very avoidant attachment style.
Yeah.
So like I tend to cut ties very quickly, and so save myself. At least back when I was younger, I had I'm more secure now, but
yeah.
very much avoidant, dismissive growing up. And part of that because the absence, right? They weren't there.
Yeah.
But how me and my dad got cool was he never, when we started to reconnect, it was partially because of his business, because this guy sucks with computers. So like he would ask me like, hey, John, can you like help me make an invoice on like Microsoft Word or something like that? And so I was like, all right, cool. I got you. And like little things like that here and there. And so that's kind of where it stayed in touch. But he never acted as if he was my dad. So like I called him my dad for the sake of this podcast, just to, it's more convenient than saying his name.
Yeah.
And also for the people listening, like that, so they know who I'm referring to. But I never ever called him my dad to his face. Like, you're not my dad, bro.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed. But he knows that, which is why we're cool. That's my boy now. We're cool.
Yeah.
But it's because he doesn't try to act like my dad. That ship has sailed. He wasn't there. He knows he wasn't there. He's not trying to sit here and act like, oh, hey, I want to be dad of the year now. It's like, no, that relationship will never, ever happen. And it's unfortunate, but that's what life is. And we're both okay with that. And that's why we're cool now. Whereas like with my mom, like aside from the fact that she has, mental health issues that she's battling with, like she still thinks that I'm her baby boy, but it's like same situation. That ship has sailed. You got to come to terms with it eventually.
Yeah.
And so my dad has already come to terms with that. So that's why me and him hit it off. And we got a way better relationship now than what we used to have back then. And so my feeling towards him now is like, that's my guy. And now he got me a little sister. And that little girl, like, is like my twin. I got to show you a photo one of these days. But that little girl is like my twin. She looks exactly like me. So I come to the house a lot more often now.
Just to see her.
Just to see her. And eventually I'll catch up with them here and there. But really just to see my little baby sister. But yeah.
I mean, that's awesome. And, I didn't know that about you. And, you mentioned your mom and being exposed to her mental illness, throughout your childhood. How do you think that affected you? And what did you learn from her plight with it that you've been able to, use in your life?
Yeah, I'd say, how did I deal with it? I didn't understand it. Like, how do you explain depression to a little kid? Like, hey, why are they here, but they're not all there? Like, you don't really understand that stuff, and nor did I really probe when I was younger at all. There's just a lot of anger built up. Like, a lot of anger, a lot of just frustration that just been built up and pent up for so long that has never, ever really been worked through. I say I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm a pretty wise guy, too.
Absolutely.
And I can figure a lot out that I put my head to. So the two hardest things that I've yet to figure out is one, entrepreneurship, and two, my relationship with my mom, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Two hardest things I've ever had to do. And still haven't figured out them yet. Still figuring out this entrepreneurship thing. Will forever be learning and figuring out and growing.
Mm-hmm.
The whole mom situation. Part of me is like, I mean, I would like to, I guess, partially because I guess you only get one shot. Two, but like I don't want to feel like it's out of obligation.
What is the thing that you struggle with the most about it?
In terms of like fixing my relationship with my mom?
Yeah.
She just gets me angry. Like hearing her breathe just gets me annoyed. Like, and then like try to tell me for example, she'll be at the house and like, let's say I'll go out, right? Or whatever. I pay rent. I'm paying my bills. I got my business situated. You don't even live in the same household as us. Why on earth are you trying to tell me what time I should be home by?
Yeah.
Like, I understand that's your way of trying to be a mom or whatever, but like, again, ship sailed.
Yeah.
And so like stuff like that. And I express like the things that annoy me and get under my skin to her that she continues to do. Now, again, she's not all there. So it's like, I guess I have to give her some grace, but it's like, one of those things where it's just like, I also don't have to have her in my life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I learned early on that for me personally, I never really gave values to titles that much growing up. Partially because, I mean, I done seen so much like BS when it comes to like, for example, family. And everyone wants to quote, the blood is thicker than water and stuff like that. And, you should love your family and whatever, be there for your family. But I heard when I was working at the restaurant I used to work at, the full quote actually, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Meaning the family you choose to be family is thicker than the family you're born into. And so like that put into words what I felt for so long, because like my family moved funny for so long. We would have parties and celebrations. As soon as everyone goes home, they start talking about each other. And it's like, you guys call that family, but that's not how I think a family should operate. Like that didn't align with my values. And so like just little things like that added up over a long enough time really kind of like desensitized me to like the word family and, mom, dad and stuff like that. My mom and dad was physically absent. Mom was emotionally kind of mentally absent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that, I guess, over a long enough time period compounded to like, me just like, and that's why I'm so big on like who I talk to, who I spend time with, who I open up to. Because a lot of people, it's just like a friend to everyone is an enemy to thyself. And you can only upkeep with so many relationships, right? And so I try to be intentional with the people that I do meet and the people I do talk to and open up to, because some people are just not aligned with you, and that's cool,
That's so funny that you say that, because that's one thing that I always identified with you, and it's conversations that we've had on the side, either at events or in just our phone calls.
Yeah.
And when I call you, we usually have a meaningful conversation. That's something that I've always appreciated about you. And the one thing I always noticed, I mean, you're 24, 25?
Yeah, 23.
You're turning 24. Yeah. And, I always looked at you as someone who just like moved a lot more maturely than your peers. And that's something I admired to you, and I gravitated towards you. And I also always understood that you never took things personally, like when it came to if I was doing something and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's why I always knew that it was a safe, like I could call you.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that element of our friendship, frankly, because there aren't many people who are like that. Like there's a lot of people out there who take things personally. There's a lot of people out there who associate the titles and they put a lot of value into that. But at the end of the day, I kind of love the perspective, and now I understand why you have that perspective, which is like super awesome, man. Now as you're growing up, and I know you ended up jumping into the restaurant industry and working at Zion the Whale. You ended up going to UConn, and then making the decision to leave UConn. That was a big decision.
Yeah.
So walk my audience through that, and what drove you to do that, and what emotions were associated with that.
Yeah. So my thought process going into college, so in order to understand why I made the decision, I got to give a little context. So my thought process going into college was, I've seen somewhere that, and this is back in high school, so I'll butcher the numbers a little bit, but the study showed like roughly between the 1960s and up to that point in time, that the average tuition had increased like 67%, and the average wages / salaries increased only like 27%. Now, at that point in time, being in high school, the first thing I realized from that is like, all right, going to school for money is the wrong reason. Because clearly there's a big misalignment, big gap here that people aren't talking about. So off the rip, I was not going to school to get that degree and get a job because I knew that, again, the numbers showed that that wasn't adding up. And so
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I was a grade above in math. One of my boys in a football team one day, we were in the math lab, and he was working on some college applications. So at the time when I was still in school, the way to apply to college was the Common App, right? The Common Application, whatever it's called, portal.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
so he was working on that stuff. He was like, "Yo, John, bro, if I were you, I'll get on this now so that you're not doing it when you're in senior year, right?" And so I got on that by the end of junior year, right? I had my common essay already finished, my common application already finished. And then by the time people were getting applications out,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting acceptance letters in. So I ended up getting into 13 schools. Originally, I wanted to get into PACE because I wanted to go to school for business a little bit. In downtown Manhattan, my thought process was like, you can't get more business than New York City, right?
Isn't Pace in Westchester?
Now, PACE is in downtown Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken. PACE University?
I thought Pace was in White Plains.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, PACE University? No, I was in Manhattan.
Yeah.
No, I promise you, they have a
They probably have a satellite campus in the city, or maybe their business school is.
yeah.
But I mean, you didn't major in geography, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. Shit.
No, we can keep that. That's
I'll
funny.
still use ways to this day to get around Stanford. But
Yeah.
so that was the thought process. When I went to orientation, I'm pretty sure I was in the city, bro.
Okay.
So, like,
Okay.
I'm not too far off. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
I digress. I ended up going to school for academics. I had pretty solid grades, right?
Yeah.
3.5, 12.30, SAT super scored. It was like 12.20 without the super score, so it's pretty much the same thing. But I ended up going to UConn. Again, the goal was to, all right, I don't know any path other than go to school, graduate, get a job. I already had a feeling that that path wasn't for me. I couldn't see myself working till I was 65.
Got it.
I wasn't an entrepreneur or entrepreneurially minded in the way a typical entrepreneur is, where I wasn't like, I didn't have side hustles, didn't have the snow shoveling business in the wintertime. I wasn't mowing lawns in the summer. Like, I was just, playing sports, playing video games, and I'd be with the guy. I caddied a little bit, but aside from that, I wasn't really thinking entrepreneurially or,
Yeah.
trying to hustle, make money. And so I went to school, right? I give you all that context to remember. I went to school not because I wanted a degree and to make money. I wanted to network and live my own. Those are the two reasons, right? First year on campus, I had a blast. 3.83 GPA. I was in a couple fashion shows. I was heavily involved in first year programs. I was in a learning community for like first and second year students, and like I was running, like pretty much not running it, but like almost, I was in all the events and being the guy that they were wanting to help be the face of all the events and stuff like that. So like I was heavily involved my first year on campus, and then March 2020 happened, and that kind of screwed up everything. And so during the pandemic, that end of that freshman semester, it was weird because most of the teachers weren't accustomed to teaching on Zoom. And even after that summer break where they had, a couple months to practice and prepare for the upcoming fall 2020 semester, that wasn't enough time. And so I'm on the fall 2020 semester, and I'm just hopping onto my 8 a.m.s, opening up my laptop, going right back to bed, waking up. We had tests. Everyone was cheating on them. Like, they try to have these like screen monitoring protection programs where like they see your eyes and track you to see if you're looking off screen or something like that. Those didn't work at all. And so I'm like, yo, what are we paying for?
Yeah.
And I'm still taking out student loans for this. And around that time, I ended up reading a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that book helped me realize that there was another way of viewing the world that wasn't being taught in school, wasn't being taught in my environment, but more importantly, wasn't being taught at home. And that kind of was the catalyst to going in YouTube University and looking up everything I could on personal finance and entrepreneurship and ways to make money and credit cards and all that stuff. And I just kept reading more books and watching more YouTube videos. And I feel like in that winter break between fall 2020 and spring 2021, it was just like, I feel like I learned more than all my years of schooling combined, put together, in terms of actual practical stuff that I could apply to my life, right? So I came back spring 2020. And around that time, too, I tried to get into real estate investing.
Yeah.
I tried to get into wholesaling. Long story short, an attorney gave me some bad information. Like, you can't do it. Not illegal. I mean, it's not legal. And I was like, all right, cool. Then spring 2021 semester comes around. Now, at that time, I was working at K Jewelers, right?
Stanford Mall?
Stanford Mall, yep. I was
Okay.
working at K Jewelers, and I ended up going out to eat with one of my old friends from high school, and we ended up meeting a counselor who connected him with a commercial real estate agent. And they were like, hey, John, you want to hop on a Zoom call with us? And I was like, yeah. So on that Zoom call, I ended up, hitting it off with that guy, and he said, make sure you go find a mentor. So I reached out right after the call, like, hey, can you be my mentor? You said we need to find one. Can you be mine?
Yeah.
And he kind of re-sparked that flame in me to get into real estate, but this time not as an investor, as a real estate agent. And so this is maybe February 2021 now, I stopped showing up to my college classes, signed up for Real Estate University, and then from there, I never really looked back after that. I never looked back, never went back, never just had thoughts of going back after that. That pretty much was it. And then with the whole regulation they were trying to put in during the pandemic or stuff like that, for requirements to come back on campus, I was just like, screw that. I'm out of there. And that's the end of my college journey. You asked me about the emotions I felt at that time. And I already kind of felt like college was a scam going into college. Right. Then the pandemic happened. So I'm like, this is definitely more of a scam because why am I paying for this?
Yeah.
And then for me, it was just like, I've always been a ready, fire, aim kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, I didn't need all the details or have the game plan or have the full strategy and how everything's going to play out. I was like, all right, I got this vision. Let's run it up and see where it take me.
It's funny you mentioned mentors and the importance of mentorship, especially post-college and the roles that they played in your life. And I've seen how you have leaned on Brandon, leaned on Rob, and that's like your counsel, and you see, you pick their brain and you collaborate with them. Talk about the role of just like the relationships, and we'll talk about the role of relationships first, and how important they are in what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think relationships are important. I hate the term self-made millionaire. I think anyone who uses that term is made of BS. And just doesn't want to give credit where it's due. And I know it feels good to say that you did it on your own and no one helped you, but in all actuality, like, for example, who made this mic? Who made this couch? Who's behind the cameras right now helping us do this whole podcast? Right? Who made this whole building? We can keep the list going. No one's self-made. And so that's my mindset. And so for me, the relationships are everything. It's helped me to get to where every stage of business, every stage of everything, like even in college, I mean, in high school, when I was trying to think about going to colleges, like I was a part of a program called Future 5. And that program was like helping me coordinate back and forth with the dean, one of the deans at Pace, to help me get into the school and help me get a good financial aid package and stuff like that. My buddy from college, from my high school football team, who was in my math class, that told me about the Common App essay a year before. So I got on that before I ever, before junior year even finished. I was already finished and had stuff sent out. And then fast forward, right, when I was in college, right, I was involved. And there's a situation where first year program community I was in, they have a end of year trip, right, a couple $1,000s, right. My financial aid was short a couple $1,000s. Right, for one of my first, I think it was my second semester, right? So it's either pay for that money for the semester or pay for the trip. There's no either or. It was one or the other. That was it. And from there, it was just like, I ended up getting a call. I remember because it was yesterday. I was in the student union. I was sitting with one of my friends doing homework. I get a random phone call, right? It's this guy named David. And David, it was David. David called me like, "Hey, John, we know you have a little situation going on with your semester and the tuition. We got that taken care of. You're all good." Mind you, never even talked to David about it. I talked to one of my counselors or the admissions people, advisors in the School of Business, right? I talked to her. She went and worked some magic behind the scenes, and next I get a phone call a couple days later saying, "Hey, your tuition taken care of. Don't worry about it. We want to see you go on that trip." Now the pandemic happened, so that ended up not playing out, but still, stuff like that. And then we get into business, right? Got that. I met that guy, right? He's a commercial agent. That kind of kickstarted the fire to get me into real estate, right? And then he connected me with one of his buddies that I was meeting with right? And then that helped me, again, really pursue my license in that time period. And I got into real estate. I got my license. I was in a bunch of free real estate groups. I got asked to teach a class on social media. That class had over 440 people sign up for it. Not because I was a marketing genius, but because there was already a group that was made, and one of the hosts of the group asked me to teach and put me in front of her audience that she already built, right? Which then led to more social media classes, which eventually led to me teaching AI. And so, like, relationships are everything to me, which is why I'm also so careful with who I let in.
Yeah.
I'm very observant. I like to view people, and for me, I think it's very easy to build strong relationships when you find relationships with people you actually align with. Like, for me personally, like, if you're not a Christian, you're not a man or woman of God, you don't believe in Jesus Christ, like, there's only so far I could let you in. I could still be great friends with you. I could
Yeah.
still have a great conversation with you. But, like, in order to get to my innermost circle, we have to be sitting on the same values. Now, we don't have to see the world eye to eye. Like, and we don't have to see everything the same, right? Because everyone's going to have a different perspective. But you could be two sides of the same coins. Most people are trying to get along with different coins, right? Some people are quarters or nickels or dimes or pennies, and that's not to say like their value or anything. We're just different coins, right? And they're trying to build something, whether it's romantically or whether it's professionally or whether it's platonic, whatever it may be, I feel. But like if you're building on different fundamental values, it's like building a house on sand, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the way that you approach relationships is definitely reflective of your early life and how you knew there were certain relationships you could take in moderation or didn't even need to include in your life in order for you to grow, and you didn't let like the complexities of those relationships really affect your future and your trajectory and what you wanted to do. You know, when you talk about faith, which you just alluded to, I mean, I'd love to talk about like your relationship with faith and you know how it's evolved throughout your journey.
Yeah. So for me, I ended up living in the projects. Like I used to, the way it was set up was for anyone that's listening, like it was almost kind of like a cul-de-sac, like a lot bigger. And so there would be this church van or church bus that used to come all the time, just pick up people from the hood and bring them to church. And one time, a family friend of mine invited me, and this is around third grade. I don't remember the exact time period, but somewhere around third grade, I ended up getting asked by one of my family friends, she's like a cousin to me, so a couple years older. He's like, "Hey, John, every Friday we do this thing called Fun Fridays. And they go to the church, all the kids, the young adults or young teens, whatever. You go to church on a Friday. At the time, that's when the GameCube was out and popping.
Yeah.
So we would play Mario Kart Double Dash. We played this Naruto fighting game. And then after that, we would get some pizza, some soda, and they would teach us like, youth Bible study classes or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't really remember too much of what I learned, but like that got me in the doors. Eventually that upgraded to going on actually on Sundays. Now, my grandparents and my family on my mom's side of the family, they're all Catholic. I've never seen any of them ever step foot in a church or ever pick up a Bible, but they all be reciting prayers during Thanksgiving in unison. It's like kind of like it's like embedded in their blood. I don't know how they remember all them prayers in Spanish, but they all so their faith was kind of always there. But
probably
never
from
seen
childhood.
I never seen no one practice it.
Yeah,
I never seen anyone actively practice their faith. They just recited prayers at Thanksgiving and Christmas and parties or whatever. Before we blessed the food, that's pretty much it. That was the extent. Then I started going to Fun Fridays. Eventually, that led to church. We had a pastor change around like 5th grade, 6th grade, if I'm not mistaken. And those new pastors that came in, they were a lot younger, and they had. So I go to the Salvation Army. A lot of people don't know it's not like just a donation center or a thrift store. It's a church. That's how they started off. Right? It's been a church, and then it grew into all the stuff that it is now. But it was always a church, and so I started going there. And then my new pastors came in. They started implementing a bunch of youth programs. So I was doing like monologue. I played trombone. I had a late growth spurt, so like I had like little arms trying to play trombone. I was couldn't play, and I was in so many things. I was singing. That was before my voice dropped a little bit, so I could still hit high notes. I was involved in every little church program I could remember, and I had a blast learning. And that was kind of like I was in competitions for the church, going to like almost like conferences for like young adults that are followers and so like I was really heavily involved in my middle school years into early high school years at my church, right? And into my senior year. And then remember my senior year, one of my my English teacher, he would go on random like philosophical tangents, and one day I remember him asking, he was like, are you blindly believing or do you actually have faith? And I was confused because up to that point in time, I've only ever been to one church. I only ever seen, Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I only ever seen what the Salvation Army, and my pastors preached. And so that was a very interesting point because I always been very like a deep thinker.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about, do I have actual faith, or am I believing what I believe because that's what I was told to believe? And it kind of sent me through like a period of my life. I never steered off my faith. Like I always believed in, but it was just like in college it was dope because like I had a philosophy class and they talked about like Taoism and Taoism and Buddhism and all these different things. And so like I've always been very open-minded and receptive
Yeah.
to other cultures and perspective. And I feel like I always drawn back to Christianity. And that really allowed me to like realize that, hey, like my faith is conscious. Like I'm not just following suit, And I always like, again, once I went to college and the pandemic happened, still believe in Christ, never really steered off the path, but it's just like stopped going to church. Church was closed for a while, so wasn't reading my Bible, wasn't none of the youth programs anymore. So I feel like a while I was stagnant with my faith and just not really, I guess you could say backsliding a little bit, but kind of for the most part, just staying
Not
stagnant.
being as active.
Yeah, I wasn't as active. And then once I got into entrepreneurship, I think around 2024, I was like my sister, like, yo, we got to lock back in.
Yeah.
And so since 2024, we pretty much go to church every Sunday. And I really wanted to get back in my faith because in the world of business, you meet a lot of people who are rich and, depressed, rich and fat, rich and miserable, rich and divorced, rich and you name it. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of material success, and their other parts of their life is in shambles. Now, we always hear you can't have your cake and eat it too. I feel like in life, like in certain respects of life, I think you can't do that. It's impossible. But in life as a whole, I feel like you can. Like you can be right a man of God and be happily married and have a happy family and have be in great shape and have a successful business, and like who's to say you can't, right? And so that's how for me I knew that's how I wanted to build my life. Like I want to be happily married with family, with kids, and have my house and have my business booming and be able to do stuff I enjoy, still be able to play ball and play volleyball and do the things, whatever, still be able to go out with the guys. I want to be able to do all that without having to give something up or have a particular part of my life in shambles. Not to say I want to live a perfect life, but just to say like, hey, I don't think like you have to give up anything or everything for the pursuit of material success. You feel me?
Yeah.
And so for me, with that mindset, really quick, I'll bring it to a close. For me, like my faith, then I decided to like go lock in and go back to church every Sunday. And a lot of that was because I wanted to be able to discern who's who and what's what, especially as I get into bigger rooms and more successful rooms with people who got a lot more money. It's very easy to get misguided. And if you're not able to discern, then you'll be able to easily persuaded down the wrong way without even realizing it sometimes. So that's kind of what led me back. And then around March this year, I really started to lock back in and decided I didn't want to be a once a week Christian anymore. And like, I haven't been doing the best job. I'm doing a better job of trying to read the word and really profess my faith and really talk about, my faith in Christianity a lot more publicly and openly, because why can people talk about the universe and manifesting and all this other stuff and zodiac signs like it's casual conversation, but as soon as I mention Jesus Christ, now people get a little cringe. Now people get a little tense.
Yeah.
But you can ask me what's my zodiac sign, and so if that rubs some people the wrong way, by all means, it happens. But that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super healthy actually to be grounded in your faith and to practice your faith actively and to share it, because at the end of the day, I'll speak from my personal experience where I wasn't really associating myself with God or any religion for quite a long time, and during that period of time, and I look at it as I kind of let the devil run amok in my head, which dictated a lot of decisions I made, a lot of the people who I associated with. And when the devil's running amok in your head, then it's going to attract devilish things. And for me, in order for me to turn the corner, I had to essentially surrender and really find something, like that I could believe in. Obviously, God, I choose to call God, that I could just really just lean on
Yeah.
in the dark, in that darkness. And that was so pivotal for me to really be able to turn the corner. And you had alluded to how you meet these people who may have the wealth and the physical things, but they're suffering this other component of their life. And I always say that if it's finances and money that are your guiding North Star, there's a good chance that's how you're going to end up, because it's never going to be enough, because you're always going to think you could throw money at a problem in order to feel joy, or in order to feel contentness, or in order to have a family, in order to have these other things. And for me, I now understand it's really just doing the right thing and following the path that my faith leads me to.
Mm-hmm.
And the other blessings come. And it's been proven in my lived experience since choosing to turn that corner and ignore the devil and invite God into my life and that higher power and that energy. And it's also, attracted people like you, and brought, people like Brandon and Rob and all these guys who I now like really lean on, because it's that mutual North Star that we have, which is getting better collectively. Quick break to shout out our sponsor, Relive the Moments. Founded by John Lim, they're redefining how we share memories. From tap-to-play photo frames to interactive coasters, they turn ordinary objects into powerful, shareable experiences. Perfect for weddings, events, or milestone moments. Relive, reconnect, reimagine. Check them out at www.relivethemoments.com. Now back to the show.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about how, your entrepreneurship journey, because we discussed it a little bit yesterday. I heard you talk about it, and I really loved what you had to share because it was honest. And you talked about, how you set these goals, and when you look at them, and you're very realistic. And I think that's something that, like, I think is really important, to be like really realistic when you're looking at an objective and understanding the work that you need to get into it, and after you try a couple of things, whether it's feasible. And you mentioned the openness to pivot. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for me, pivoting has really helped me out a ton. I heard somewhere you have to be willing to take the dog behind the shed and put him down sometimes. Now, it's a very dark and tough and kind of morbid like analogy to use, but like a lot of times that's how it gotta be with our business, or like, our decisions in life, whether it's, you having a business or a career.
Yeah.
Now you have to maybe put to a pin in it and pivot into somewhere else, because it might not be, feeding the you that you want to become. And so it's like, for me, part of me pivoting was also shiny object syndrome. If you call a spade a spade. Part of it was shiny object syndrome. It's like, all right, I got this opportunity, but like I want to try a lot of things, and so I'm very, very ready, fire, aim minded, and so like I get an idea, I don't really figure out the details, and so I just kind of jump it all in and figure it out from there. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But like for me, like everything happened so quickly. Like 1 second, I was enjoying my college experience, having a blast right before spring break, March 2020, and then next thing you know, like I never went back to school ever, right? It all happened. And then one day, I'm taking these virtual online classes, and then next thing you know, I'm watching every YouTube video I can on freaking how to build my credit and personal finance and entrepreneurship 101, right? And then 1 second I'm, working 2 jobs, studying for my real estate exam, doing like 70 hours a week, and then I'm licensed. And then shortly after that, podcasts get launched. Shortly after that, I taught my first social media class, right? While I'm still working at a restaurant. And so juggling all those different things, nothing was working out. And so around September of 2022, I was talking to my mentor, and he pretty much, our first call, he was like, we met for 6 calls. And so my mentor at the time, his name was Mark. Shout out to Mark. Mark was like, hey, John, like pretty much real estate isn't going to work out for you. Like from what it sounds like, you're really not passionate about it at all. You sound way more passionate about the social media stuff you got going on and the podcast stuff you got going on. Why don't you just pursue that? And it's thoughts that I've felt, but wasn't comfortable really admitting to myself. It kind of reassured that the feelings that I had that didn't want to verbalize, like were valid feelings.
That's
Because
a good mentor.
I dropped out of college to get into real estate.
Mhm.
And then I posted my photo that, hey, I'm a real estate agent now.
Yeah.
And like people know, so it's like, damn, so like it failed.
Yeah.
Like, that was the thing I banked dropping out on. I banked becoming successful in real estate as the thing that's gonna make it all paying out, right? And putting a pin in that was tough, but I didn't like the day-to-day of it. I tried it out, and now some may say I never gave it a fair shot, which I didn't. I was juggling other things while doing that. So there's that argument. And so, but for me at the time, I tried it. I didn't really enjoy it. Didn't want to do the day-to-day. And so after that, I pivoted. And so
Yeah.
then I started Stop Stare Media, right? And then it was originally a social media agency. I was going to teach the social media classes I was doing for free, like I was always doing. And then whoever wanted me to just run their social media for them, I would do their content. Found out after my very first client, I hated that. And so from there, I was like, yeah, scrap this idea up, no more, but done, pivoted again. That was for a different reason. I found out very quickly I didn't want to pursue that path. It sounded way better, I could just charge a couple people a couple $1,000 a month, get a couple clients, I'm making $10,000 a month. I got an agency.
Easy peasy, right?
I hire an editor, stuff like that. Like, life's good. Nope. After my first client, I realized very quick, I'm scrapping that up. Then I got into money. The podcast is still going on in the background, and I'm still working on it in the background while all this is panning out. And then I was like, all right, let me go all in on finding, this podcast thing. And around this time, that's when I found a concept called Ikigai that I told you about. It's a Japanese concept. For anyone listening, the place where this originate from is called the Land of Immortals, because they have one of the most centurions on the planet. And so, meaning people who lived over 100 years.
Yeah.
And so people there live a pretty long time in comparison to the rest of the world. I think the U.S. is like 70 something for men or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And so in there, they follow this old philosophy called Ikigai. It stands for your reason for being. And it's the intersection of 4 circles, right? What you love to do, mixed with what the world needs, mixed with what you can be rewarded for, mixed with what you're good at. When those 4 circles intersect, the intersection is called your Ikigai, your reason being. What you love to do. You need to have some sort of passion or burning reason why you're doing it. Like, you have to enjoy it. You have to feel good doing about it. Now, that's not to say that you're never going to have bad times. Like, everything has, some garbage that comes with it, There's never a perfect thing. But when you find something that's worthwhile and meaningful, that'll outweigh everything in the long run, right? So that's what you have to love what you do. Then what does the world need? Like, for example, in the pandemic, right? If you were selling masks and toilet paper, you were making money.
Yeah.
The world needed a mask and toilet paper. Like, there's not enough supply to go around, right? So what does the world need, right? Because if no one needs it, there's no demand for it. You're going to have a very hard time. You're going to be fighting an uphill battle, right? What can you be rewarded for? There's a lot of people who do stuff for free because they love it and stuff like that, but free doesn't pay bills. IOUs don't pay bills. We still got money and people we got to support and feed, right? So what can you be rewarded for? What can you make some monetary means from, right? So you can sustain your lights, your bills, your et cetera, your food, your everything. And then what are you good at? One, I think what you're good at and what you love to do kind of play hand in hand. Because if you're good at something, you tend to enjoy it more.
Yeah.
So then you're going to love it even more. But also what you're good at is just like, I like to switch that a little bit. I think for me, I would switch it personally, and I want to do a TEDx talk on this. This is what my TEDx talk was originally supposed to be about. On what do you have the aptitude to be great at? Because there's a very, very big difference between being good and being great. And the amount of greatness requires focus. You can be a natural talent, be really good. But being world class, being at the top of your class is where all the money is at. There's a very big gap in terms of pay between just average people in their, whatever position in the industry they're in, and the people that are at the top of their industry, right? Like average, if you look on Indeed, average social media manager makes somewhere between 47, 49,000 and 90 something thousand, right? And the ones who are making, at the top of their industry are making way more and probably making 90,000 a month.
Yeah.
40,000 a year, 9,000 a month, very big discrepancy, right? But when you're the best of the best, you can charge what you're worth and make a lot of doing. So that intersection is called your Ikigai. So long story short, all fingers pointed back to my podcast. And so I was like, all right, screw the social media agency. Let me go all in on my podcast. Ended up meeting one of my old mentors, Jason. Jason ended up leading me toward teaching AI and use ChatGPT to create a webinar on how to use ChatGPT. That popped off. And so I'm like, all right, what if I stop teaching social media, stop doing the agency thing? What if I just taught people how to use ChatGPT? And so I've been running with that for the past almost 2.5, 3 years now. And that's been going really well. But like, to answer your original question about pivoting, right? How do you know when it's time to pivot? I think you'll never be 1,000. For a lot of things in life, you're never going to be 1,000% certain. You'll never actually know. Are you willing to endure what comes with the decision that you're making? What are the perks? What are the cons? Are the cons outweighing the perks, or are the perks outweighing the cons? And if you're okay with that, I feel like make your decision. It's hard to give advice for everyone, but like that's what played out for me. I was just like, the pros outweighed the cons each time, and for each situation it was kind of a little different, but like overall the perks outweighed the con, and that's what led me to pivot the way I did when I did.
Yeah, it's so funny because like I also had a similar journey in a sense where like I looked at real estate too. I took the test. I took the class. I took the test, and I think it was even, like late last year.
Yeah.
Where I was like, all right, like I'm gonna jump into real estate. I had a friend on who's a realtor, and we literally said that I was gonna join his team on the podcast episode. And something happened where, and I can only say it's, I think it was like my faith in God and who like kind of steered me in a different direction where I kind of started to observe the way that realtors move.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want to constantly be on the move. I don't want to constantly be like going to open houses. I don't want to have like such a lack of control in a sense of my schedule and almost be like, I just didn't want that. I didn't want that hustle. But on the same token, what I do is very similar, but like you said, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I'm good at it. And, one of the things, same kind of thing with you is like early on in my, when I launched a company 2 years ago, I threw a bunch of things at the wall, and I initially launched as a nonprofit consulting agency. And then, I went through that process in the first year, and I worked with some great nonprofits, and I really learned a lot. But the things that I learned about myself were the most valuable. And what I learned for myself is I really like to do events. I really like bringing people together. I really like aligning like-minded brands. That's where I felt that I was best at cultivating relationships. So I was like, all right, like I love giving back through nonprofits, but I'm also not like equipped to do that in a sense where when you're working with a nonprofit, you're always going to have to donate part of your time and donate. And I'm just starting. I'm not in a position to donate time yet. Once I build and build and build, then I'll have a little more latitude to be able to donate time and assist nonprofits and whatnot. But I almost now realize that I went in the reverse order with that initial process, and it was okay because, and I'm grateful that I realized that because then I was able to make an immediate pivot. And, obviously with the launch of the podcast, I really wanted to give people, a platform to be able to share this story and, relate to the audience. And, hopefully, each one of my episodes, someone's listening to it and be like, damn, like I can relate to that. Like I needed to hear that today. Like that's really where I'm inspired in the podcasting. And obviously I'd love for this to grow, but it's really now in my second year where I really can confidently say that I'm very close to that center, that ikigai that you talked about. And it's cool that you said that. What's up?
I wanted to touch on what you said about like you're in your second year and you're finding that ikigai, I guess you could say. But one of my favorite sayings is the person who loves to walk will always walk further than the person who's walking just for the destination. And like for me, I have a podcast as well. Like the reason I got to where I'm at right now and episode counts is because I just love the game. Now I had some hiatuses. People don't see that portion, right? I had probably 3 or 4 times where I went like a month, 2 months without posting anything. But over a zoomed out enough time horizon, no one sees the little blips, right? They just kind of see,
consistent,
going up. Yeah. But they don't see the blips where I went a couple months without posting anything and didn't have any reason as to why, aside from like I just didn't make the time for it, right? I just didn't feel like in that season of my life I had the bandwidth to do so. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right? And that's fine too. And I think a lot of people, you mentioned like, you learned about yourself through the whole not-for-profit consulting agency. Like, starting a business is probably the best personal development journey you can ever embark on. Right? Yeah, you make some money. Yeah, you can meet a lot of dope people. There's all that too. Yeah, that's also big perks, big plus of being an entrepreneur. You make your own schedule, you make your own time, whatever. You also get to learn more about yourself than you probably ever will.
Yeah.
Any other path. So it's also a dope experience. You get to just figure yourself out more and more and more. And it's dope when you realize that you're figuring yourself out. And it's kind of like, like a third party observer moment where you're like catching yourself in the moment. Like, yeah, like I really don't align with this. And like me years ago, I probably would have done it. And then you can recognize the change that you're undergoing is that much better, because it's just like, yeah, I'm growing, I'm evolving, I'm stepping more into the person I'm meant to become.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you said it, because one of the coolest and most humbling experiences about this business journey now has been like a surefire indicator that I'm doing the right thing now, and is that people are reaching out to me and asking me for advice, or hey, let's have lunch and talk about this idea I have. And that's such a humbling experience, because in my head, I'm always going to go back to that self-doubt in a way where it's like, hey, I'm just like 2 years into this business. I don't know if I could help you. That was my mindset maybe like a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, all right, let me hear you out. Let me see how we could do this.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out. And people love that, and I think that's really like the mindset shift, because I think for so long in my life, bro, like I would always just kind of doubt myself.
Yeah.
Like that's been like an underlying thing in my life where, I'd always like, and it's rooted in like the feeling of like not being enough and whatnot, whatever, it's all that. Now it's like, no, you know what? Like I have something to offer, and now I have a package that I can offer to you up in, and I can also value myself accordingly. And like in a couple of my early projects, I totally undervalued myself.
Yeah.
When it came to like the amount of work I was doing, the amount of hours that it was consuming, all of that. But it was because I didn't know the scope of the project until I was right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Now, like having that experience, I'm like, all right, like that's a $20,000 project. That's going to be 40 hours, just 40 to 60 hours a week for 5 months at least. So there might even be like, there might be some overtime that I'm gonna have to tack onto that too. And, knowing that though, and it's not because, I'm being greedy as much as it's like, I understand the value of my time, and I also understand the value that I bring to projects. And this is something that can only be built by going through those first years of just like uncertainty and making multiple pivots, to where I'm in a comfortable place. And, it's a blessing. And, and it's also because I'm also always willing to learn, and I'll meet anyone.
Yeah.
I'll meet anyone with a good idea.
To your point, you mentioned a lot of good stuff. And I've similar to you in a way, like, I think sometimes people mistake the fact that like, I don't boast my chest and poke my chest out as much as some other people may, that I don't have it low key popping.
Yeah.
I've done quite a bit, but I don't really talk much about it as much, maybe as much as I should. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever should means. And it's interesting because I see people who haven't done as much or aren't as well off as they appear to be, flaunting.
Yeah.
Like as if they have it figured out, and then people gravitate towards them. And I just like to sit back and watch and observe, and it's like, well, if only you knew. But then it's like, so it's interesting. It's very interesting because, to your point, like, if I sat and talked about, just stat padded my resume, and talked about it a lot, I feel like, to your point, I feel like, I don't know if it's a self-sabotage thing or just like, I like being reserved.
I mean, I don't think it's like, because I think you're very conscious of not coming off as braggadocious.
Yeah.
And at the same token, there's also a way of just sharing what you've done. And like, hey, I worked on this project. I worked on this project. These were the results.
Yeah.
These are the results that I can provide, and I do probably think that you should talk about it more, because I think the people who work with you talk about it in that way.
Yeah.
Talk about you in that way. I think anybody who meets you talks about you in that way. So why not talk about yourself that way? So like, at the end of the day, like, Well, fuck, I talk about you that way, bro. But I think that comes with just like you said, like you don't want to come off as someone who like those like other people.
Yeah.
Because you do come across those people who they're great marketers, but then you sit down with them one-on-one and you're like, tell me what your process was, and they're like, oh well, and you're like, okay, well, I kind of need to know. So
to
that
your point, one of my favorite quotes, a big quotes, guys, for anyone listening, if you haven't caught on already.
He loves quotes.
Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Yeah, it's so funny how many people try to explain what they do and just overcomplicate everything. And a lot of people, like, you can just hear all the jargon. Like, for example, I teach AI. I could very easily talk about, do you know what GPT stands for in Chat GPT?
No.
Take a guess.
Genius prompt teacher.
Generative pre-transformer.
Oh.
What the hell does that even mean, bro? Like, if I were to start slinging jargon like that, like instantly I would lose everybody, right? And so it's like, for me, it's like, but I understand how the tool works.
Yeah.
And I understand how to explain it. I understand where people are at and how to take what I know and bring it to where people are at.
Yeah.
I think it came to the realization a couple of weeks. A lot of people claim to be experts. I think the differentiation between someone who's very knowledgeable in their industry, in their field, and an expert, someone who's well knowledgeable, well read, well studied, whatever it may be, they know the information, right?
Mhm.
No guarantee. I mean, like, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. They know their stuff. An expert not only knows their stuff, they also know the audience that they're trying to help and knows how to bring that information in a way that can help the people they're trying to reach.
So like the practical application to their respective client.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like you can be very well studied, very well educated, very smart, and not be an expert for the simple fact, at least according to my own definition, that you can't articulate that simply enough for your audience to do anything with that information.
Yeah.
And so to spin that back to what I mentioned earlier about simplicity being the ultimate sophistication, a lot of people overcomplicate things and then sell you a solution to the problem that they just overcomplicated.
Yeah.
So to venture to your point about marketers, a lot of people are marketing and that's their strategy. They're talking about, hey, all these high level terms for whatever field they're in, right? And like, but if you do my coaching program, you do my course, whatever, and it's like, you're selling solutions to problems that you created. Like, if you just solved the problem that they originally had, a lot of that could have just been easily avoided. But no, you want to overcomplicate and, flaunt how much you know about the whatever problem or task is at hand and stuff like that. And it's like, I see that stuff and I'm just like, mental note, they probably don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think another word that people throw around way too much is the word entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner, but I can't leave my business for 3 months and it's generating money for me and it's, working on projects. I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I define entrepreneurship, where if you can leave your business and it can operate with 3 months and the checks are just hitting your bank account.
Yeah,
and I'm definitely not there yet. I'm a small business owner.
Yeah.
And I'm okay being that right now because I do look at it as I'm working towards that goal of being able to actually earn the title of being an entrepreneur. So, I think that keeps me grounded a lot because I do think that in this this business journey that I'm in, right, I need to have that level of humility, and you said you were talking about people like throwing the word expert around a lot. I think it's great. I guess if you're marketing yourself, it's great for marketing purposes. But if you brand yourself as an expert and then I meet you and I'm like, these are my problems, you claim to be an expert. How is your product or your service or the knowledge that you can offer me going to solve these problems? And you're kind of floating things by me. I've been in several meetings like that. We're like, well, you could try it this one. I'm like, no, well,
I'm not here to throw stuff at the wall. I came to you for help.
I thought you knew the answers.
Yeah.
Oh man. And I that's happened to me like multiple times, and I just get like walk away very confused.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, that's not an expert. That's someone who's passionate about, whatever field they're in. They're very passionate about it. But like you said, they can't, really figure out how to practically apply it towards my problems. So like I totally agree with you on that, bro.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you. I don't even know what I want to talk to you about. We're just flowing.
Jeez, I guess you don't want to talk to me anymore.
Nah, I
man.
still want to talk to you, bro. It's funny, man, because you, like, when I'm at events with you, bro, like, I love, like, coming up to you and just, like, shooting the shit with you and, like, talking. And we do that. I think the first time I ever met you was at the New York City Speaker School. And we were at the bar, and I just, like, walked up to you, and we had, like a 15, 20-minute conversation. You were standing over by that, like, weird booth thing that was, like, embedded.
But I thought it was our first date, you know?
Dude, it was great.
Remember vividly.
But I could so naturally communicate with you and talk to you, and I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to you. And I wasn't trying, and your communication style, I think, is what drew me to you initially.
Mm.
Talk to me about the importance of communicating in a very just, like, relatable way and the value in doing that.
Yeah, for me, how I got good at quote unquote communicating. One, I always like to talk, but then public speaking kind of came into effect a little bit. But somewhere around like 2023, I spent a lot of time. 2023 was a really deep thinking year for me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I just spent a lot of time really thinking and in my own head, in like a negative, depressed way, just like, just thinking. Just like thinking thoughts, and one of the thoughts that came to mind is like, who do I want to do life with? And like, it's a quote I shared with you before. And it's like, we're here on borrowed time. Everyone here believes that they have more time than they actually do. And just like, for me, coming back to intentionality, like, who do I want to do life with? I just want to be surrounded by dope people that I align with, right? And some people are here for a reason. Some people are here for a season. Right? Some people are here for a good time. Some people are here for a long time. And whatever that may fall, I just want whoever is around me to be good people and align with me. And for me, doing that, back to that question of who do I want to do life with, I don't want to do life with people that I have to code switch around. I don't want to do life with people that I have to put on a face for or masquerade as something that I'm not. Like, that's a lot of reason I teach social media, like, a lot too. And one of the things when it comes to teaching social media, a lot of people get burnt out. Why? Because every time they show up on, to create content, they have to put on this mask. They have to put on this image of someone that they're not entirely are. Right? Now, there's a saying, like, being professional or whatever, but, like, if the person that you see on camera, that you see on social media isn't the same you that you see behind closed doors when you look in the mirror before you hop in the shower, you're doing something wrong, right? And so for me, again, how I talk, where I grew up, that's just how I talk. Now, if I was out with the guys, I'd probably have a lot more slang. You can hear it now already. It'll be a little looser, but like I dialed it down just a tad, just for podcast. But like for the most part, I'm not gonna sit here and code switch. Like, how I talk is how I talk. Does that mean I'm a bad communicator? No. It just means I grew up in a certain area where that was the dialect.
Yep.
And that's how I grew up. That is what I was accustomed to growing up, and so that's how I naturally just communicate. Now, I think I learned a lot about public speaking and how to articulate myself and not using filler words and being able to deliver an impactful message. Like, there's so much that goes into it that now, as like from a public speaking standpoint, kind of play into it. But a lot of it just stems from just staying true to who I am. It's funny. My grandpa gave me the nickname when I was young, and I hated it so much. He gave me the nickname El Mismo Hombre, which in Spanish translates roughly to the same man. I hated this for some reason growing up. And I remember I would go to these parties. They were like, El mismo hombre, ahí llegó John Mendez, el mismo hombre. I'm just like, bro, stop calling me that. Like, I hate that nickname. And once I got older, I realized that really suited me a ton because I have grown, I have evolved, I have changed. But at heart, I'm still the same John for the most part. Right, my interests, I'm not playing video games anymore. I'm going to entrepreneur events and stuff like that. But like at my core, I'm still fundamentally the same guy.
Yeah.
I'm just more mature, a little wiser, a little smarter. I have a little more life experience right now. I'm a little more seasoned now, but for the most part, same guy. And so for me, when I'm talking to people, that's also why I'm so observant. I like vantage points. I like corner spots. I like sitting at the end of the table.
I always meet you in a corner.
Always in the corner, dark corner, with the lights dim. And for me, it's like, I like it because I get to observe. I get to watch. I get to see how people interact. I have to see, and that helps me, like, figure out who to associate myself with. And again, like, some people, I feel like God just pulls me towards certain people, and I connect. For example, like you, I just connect with. And for me, I've never been the person to smile on everyone's face and try to be meet everybody. Like they hear all the time, like the more hands you shake, the more money you make. I always hated that saying because it makes relationships and connections sound so transactional.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I meet one or two good connections in any given night. That's a solid night for me, right? And so, say all that to say, right? How did I get comfortable with my communication style? Just realizing like if how I talk, how I communicate, somehow in any way, shape, or form offends you, and I'm not talking about what I say. What I say could potentially offend you, but like just the style of how I communicate offends you in any way, shape, or form. You're not my people's.
Yeah.
In bottom line.
Yeah. It's so funny, bro, because one of the things that I learned from you early on, one of the first conversations we
Mhm.
ever had, it might have even been that. And I think
In the
about
dark
it.
corner.
It was in a dark corner, during a networking event. And you were talking about your approach to networking events, bro. And,
Mm-hmm.
early on, I was really just trying to go to as many places and, like you said, shake as many hands and blah, blah, blah. And I remember you saying to me, you go, bro, like, what are you going to do with like 100 different new relationships? You can't water them all equally. You focus on the quality ones. And I'm more of a quantity guy than a quality guy. And that's kind of how I move. And, the funniest thing is, bro, that's what I do. And I've shared this on the podcast before. Like when I go to networking events, I share my link with people. I'll small talk with people. Maybe if I have two meaningful conversations, great. And the people who end up, booking a call with me, and I'm like, okay, they actually really do want to get to know me. So let's have a meaningful conversation. And that approach has just opened so many doors. And also, I can understand how it can be perceived as I'm not as open, but it's just because I'm not walking around trying to shake 100 hands in the room. It's not that. Like if you approach me, I'm very
No, you
approachable.
aren't as open. Call a spade a spade. You're not as open. Some people are more open.
Yeah.
And to each their own, but
yeah,
you can't. I get to your point or my point that I told you. You can't water everyone equally, especially if you have that many people. Like you'll be very, very fortunate and blessed to find more than a small handful of solid people that you live your rest of your life with.
Yeah.
Like solid people that you're locked in with, like solid best friends that'll be at your wedding and be at you if you go bankrupt. Like people that'll see you at your highs and you meet us 2, 3, 4 of them, 5 of them. Like you're already doing way better than most, right? And so it's like, then outside of that, right? You don't need that many more like decent friendships where like you're not as close as your best friend or whatever, but like solid people that you can connect with, chop it up with, shoot a podcast with, like people that are cool people to be around that you align with, that support you. Maybe not as close as your best friend or your brother or your sister or whatever, but like solid people. And then from there, like little less, like more like business that's strictly business professional, but get some solid. And like, outside of that, like that maybe adds up to maybe 20 people that you could possibly like take with you on this journey we call life, and only maybe 3 or 5 of them will see it to the finish line. So it's like, what are we shaking all these hands for?
I want to talk to you a little bit about what you were talking about yesterday at Rob's event at his 100th anniversary of the Surviving the Side Hustle podcast. You talked about how 24 was a year that tested you. 2024 was a year that tested you. Can you maybe share a little bit about that and also share what you learned about yourself over that past year?
Yeah, so 2024, for anyone listening, just for a little bit of context, was my first full calendar year on my own. Leading up to that year, so coming out of college, right, I had financial aid, right? I was sitting like 40,000, had all the index funds, right? And then I was working at a restaurant, so I was making money there. And then I went in 2023, I won a scholarship, right? $10,000, 5,000, but total 10,000. I used to go to some business conferences, and like there's a lot of things that I pay for. Like for example, I paid for a TEDx program, $8,800 right there, boom, out the door, right? $8,800 out the door, right? Boom. Then I paid for like the Ubers from my house to JFK. I didn't add that stuff up. That's $100 each way,
easily,
right? And then the Ubers from the airports wherever I landed. I think I flew like 11 times in 2023. Like all in the food whenever I travel. And then there was some other I paid for this one mastermind. It was like $6K that I should never paid for. It starts to add up real quick. Mind you, now I was the year before that, 2022. I was in real estate, didn't sell any houses. I did a couple of rentals, which helped out, but I had to pay for real estate dues and all that stuff. And so
Mhm.
like, and then my podcast stuff, I was paying for that stuff, right? And then the social media stuff, like I was paying for all these things. So like all those things that add up. So before I get into 2024, I just had to give you a little bit of context that there was stuff that I didn't feel because I was sitting on the cushion
Mhm.
and I wasn't checking in. When 2024 came around, that's when everything started to hit the fan. And next thing you know, one car maxed out, and then the next car maxed out, and the next car maxed out. And it's like what I mentioned yesterday, it hurt my ego a lot because a lot of people jokingly know me, like you know me, as Mr. Mendez, right? I'm the Marriott guy. I'm Mr.
Yeah.
Points and
Mr.
Miles.
Points guy, yeah.
Yeah, I like to travel. And like now the points guy got every card maxed out, got his credit score under 500, like freaking 550 or something like that, 530. And like now 4 of my cards got closed because the balance was too high and I wasn't paying them down fast enough. And so like this is all taking place throughout that year, right? On top of that, business, I started off the year, I was trying to make 100K in a day, right? And that was in January off a launch. Launch ended up doing 17 and a half. And that's really solid. I'm grateful for that. But when your expectations so high and you fall so short, right? I made 9 off of VIP upsells. And so I only made 8 off of the actual thing that I was selling.
Yeah.
And I had almost 560 people register for that. So I had 5 out of the 560 people. That's do the math, and that's like 1% of the people buy, which is like, damn, that means 555 people said whatever you're selling is not interesting or not valuable enough for me to pay for it, right? That's a lot of people rejecting you at the same time. And so all that kind of kickstarted my year. And for that entire year, I was playing at everything like, I don't know if it's going to work out. That when I dropped out and like, I have that naive optimism when I first dropped out of college and got into entrepreneurship and I was sitting on the cushion, you couldn't tell me nothing. Everything was going to work out. And then I got into that phase where like, all right, now I don't know if this is going to work out. And then cars started getting maxed. Bills started piling up. Right? I started helping around the house more, started paying rent more. Right? Started chipping in for groceries more and stuff like that. And now it goes from, I'm not sure if it's going to work. Like, nah, this has to work or else I'm not going to be able to get money to pay these bills. Like, and I'm already unsure it's going to work, but now it has to work. And so like, you know, there's so much doubt creeping in and stuff like that. And despite that, there's also some pretty awesome stuff. Like I landed a TEDx talk. Like I hopped on my first TV show. I hopped on a speaking competition out of 6,000 people. I made it to the top 125, did a marathon, did a couple Spartan races. You know, I did some pretty exciting things and pretty awesome things in 2024. But like, you know, that was just enough to just carry me by. But in the back of my head, it was just like overwhelming. I'm trying to, you know, start my family with my girlfriend, take care of my own household, right? And still run this business. And I have all this weighing on me.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. I
right.
feel you.
And so it's like, that was a lot. I wasn't being smart with my money. And I knew it was bad, but I didn't want to check how bad it was because I was scared to see how bad it actually was. And because I never checked, it just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
Until eventually in 2025, I decided to look at where I was at. And now I'm headed back in the right direction. But like, yeah, 2024 was brutal. And I learned a lot about myself. Mentally, it kind of like really played a pretty heavy toll on me. But it's one of those things where like,
What
this
were
is what
some
I
of the
signed
most
up for.
valuable lessons you learned from that?
I mean, you survive. God
Yeah.
provides. Like, whenever there was times where like money was stupid tight, for example, I did like some random Black Friday sale. I was like, hey, I'll create you a 12-month content calendar plan for in under an hour for $97. Had like maybe like 12, 14 people buy, right? Quick little $1,500 right there, $1,300 right there, right? That helped me pay for my little bills for, you know, that last, you know, late November into December of last year. So like there's little things like that. Like in times of need, God provided ideas and blessed me with ideas to help me inch a little further, just survive long enough. Right. Just where, you know, just tough it out long enough to get to that next checkpoint, I guess you could say. So that was probably, you know, in times of doubt, in times of need, like God always provides, God always follows through. And even though I may not see it, like I just gotta trust in it.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably one of the biggest lessons. And also too, it's like, man, 2024 taught me just like this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that already, but it kind of reinforces it a little bit. It was my first year again, like It's funny, like I'm no longer with my mentor now. Not because bad reasons, just like I was like, all right, time to spread my wings on my own, test it out, and see if I can, take everything that you've taught me over the past couple of years and put it into play. So we were together for like 2.5 years, but 2023, a lot of it was like tactics, funnels, digital marketing, strategy, and then 2024, it was just like all like mental talks, like almost like borderline my therapist, pretty much,
Yeah.
like my entrepreneurial therapist, because he just gets it.
Yeah.
He's way further along in his entrepreneurial journey, and like we're very similar in our personality types, and so like a lot of our talks in 2024 were just like trying to get my head screwed on back the right way again.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of just got knocked off after all them punches.
Yeah. It's funny because, I have said this before where 2024, late 2024, I felt like I was in that place where most entrepreneurs quit,
Mm-hmm.
where most business owners will say, you know what, fuck this, it's not working. And I said that to people. I vocalized that, but I'm not going to. Particularly my dad, who's like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Are you making money? Blah, blah, blah. And, I'd be like, Dad, I'm in the place where most entrepreneurs quit, and I'm not going to. And he respected it, I guess. I mean, he didn't say shit. But like, regardless, I can relate to that. But it was one of that year of growth where I just like learned more so not so much what to do, but what not to do.
Yeah.
And I think those lessons are just as valuable.
100%. I think a lot of people shy away from sharing those stories until they make it. But like those stories are just as impactful while you're still in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that people hear like, oh, you got to be optimistic. Listen, you can't optimistic, positive-minded your way out of a freaking reality, right? Sometimes, again, you just got to call a spade a spade. Money is tight. Life sucks right now. And despite all that, I'm going to get through it. But me saying what it is isn't me sulking or, falling victim or anything like that. Like, I'm just calling a spade a spade. Like, there's nothing good about this situation except for like I'm breathing and I'm alive, right?
Yeah.
But like the situation itself, right, is not good at all. And I'm not going to quit, but I'm also going to vocalize what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and try to optimistic, abundant-minded my way through this BS. No, like this is what it is. I got to figure it out.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to figure it out. I'm not sure when, but it will happen. I do believe that. It's just that I'm also a realist. Like, this is what it is. I'm also very optimistic. Like, you can be optimistic and realistic.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're negative or a pessimist.
Totally agree. Bro, I want to pivot to purpose. And I usually ask my guests a couple questions about purpose because it's like on the wall behind me.
Yeah. I couldn't notice. Sign's not big enough.
What does the word purpose mean to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people mistake purpose for passion, and they use the word interchangeably. Passion is like an emotion, right? So I want to define that first. Passion fades very quickly. Relationships that are built in passion or founded on passion often end up in divorce. Why? Because once the passion is there, again, you're building a house on sand.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose, one of the biggest things I heard is like the difference between a goal and a purpose, right? And I'm defining other words before I define purpose because a lot of these words tend to be interchanged very, very frequently with the word purpose.
Yeah.
Like, I think a goal is something that can be accomplished, something that's measurable and tractable. A purpose is something that you're in pursuit of that you'll never be able to achieve in this lifetime, right? A goal is like, I want to help 1 million people. You could do that. You could track that, right? A purpose is like, I want to help the next 100 generations. So I want to help 1 billion people or something like you'll probably won't achieve that, but you're in pursuit of it anyways. It's something that outlives you. It's something that you're trying to help build towards, and you're never going to see. It's kind of like the best story, kind of like Moses, right? Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, but he never made it to the promised land. Despite that, he still led them out of Egypt, right? Now you can go deeper into the scripture or whatever, but like in a nutshell, right? He led them out of Egypt. He didn't make it to the promised land. He still led them out of Egypt. Right, and they were deserted in the desert for a while. They could have just packed up ship. He could have just packed up like, man, I've been stranded in this desert for years now. Like, screw it. I'm never going to make it. Someone else lead the Israelites. I kept leading them, right? Of course, he had his struggles and tribulations, whatever. But, so that's kind of like the big differentiator there. So passion, again, it's kind of like an emotion. It's a burning desire towards something, and yet, like every emotion, it can fade. It
Yeah.
comes and goes. Not to say that it's bad or good, but it's not something you should build on. A goal, right? Another word I guess interchange with passion, purpose a lot. It's something that you can accomplish, something that's measurable, something that's tangible, right? Now, how would I define purpose? I feel like purpose is the almost kind of like the pursuit of a worthy ideal that fulfills you. I guess in a way to describe it, kind of deriving that meaning a little bit from like Think or Grow Rich a little bit, but also from like a little bit of ikigai, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like once you find that, I think a lot of people mistake happiness also as well for purpose. I think happiness is another thing, just like passion, just an emotion. I think happiness and joy get mixed up. A lot of people don't know the difference. I think happiness and fulfillment also get mixed up pretty frequently. And so I feel like, again, purpose is more so like the pursuit of a worthy ideal that brings fulfillment.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think it's rooted in what you leave behind and how you give back.
Yeah.
You know, and I completely agree with that. And those other emotions that people misconstrue for purpose, I always tell myself feelings aren't facts.
Mm-hmm.
Feelings aren't facts, and you know, feelings also those two shall pass. So when I act on feeling or I act on emotion, usually not making a logical decision or one that's rooted in, is it gonna lead me to my purpose, or does it align well with my purpose?
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give to someone on that journey of finding purpose?
I would say go watch a Ikigai video. It's like 8-10 minutes long. It's a good thing. I think it really breaks it down to a tactical framework that doesn't feel like some grandiose or fluffy, mumbo jumbo or whatever. Like, right, make a list. Write down everything that you love to do. Right. Once you write that list down, make another list. Right, and write down everything that the world needs. And what I mean by that is like, what do you feel compelled to solve? Like, what problems do you feel compelled to solve?
Yeah.
And if you can't think of anything, think about what problems annoy you. Like some person somewhere was like, nah, I'm not waiting at this checkout line in the grocery store. Like, I got to be able to check out myself and go. Boom, now we have self-checkout.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, if you can't think of the problems you want to solve, think of what problems annoy you, and that might be a good signal, at least in terms of a direction that you could potentially head down, right? Then from there, right next to it, right? Write down another list, right? What can you be rewarded for? What are the different ways you could make money, that you know how to make money or would be interested in learning to make money? Like, what are all the ways you could probably make some money, right? Right now, like, for example, and don't be unrealistic. Like, right now, I'm not going to the NBA. I can't be a professional basketball player, right? that is not realistic, right? And so, like, what I could start a business. I could, get another job. I could start a little side hustle. I could teach people Spanish. Like, I could write some stuff down, right? The last thing is, what are you good at, right? Write down all the things that you have talents in, or people. Another thing, if you don't think you're talented, if you don't really view yourself highly, what do people come to you for advice for, right? What do people ask you about? What do people compliment you about? Those are good indicators of somewhere you might have some proficiency in. So write down a list, like, what are you good at, right? And go through the list and see which one checks the most boxes.
Yeah.
Like, and start there.
Love that.
And don't try to find your purpose. Try to find what isn't. And try to find out what isn't as quickly as possible, so you can cross stuff off the list, and which will inevitably make your final decision a lot easier.
I love that. Mr. Mendez, I'm super grateful for you to come in, man. And I love just talking to you. And we're obviously going to continue talking. And
in dark corners.
In dark corners, bro. I definitely want to shout out and thank Kai Visions, Claudio Valenzuela. If you are looking to start a podcast here in the New York metro area, reach out to me, reach out to Claudio at Kai Visions. Super grateful for the audience who has been with me from day one and who has joined along the journey. Please, I encourage you to share anything that resonates with you or someone who is close to you who might need to hear what we are sharing here in this community. Please like, follow, tag, whatever you can do to continue to build this community, because it's so valuable that people are learning about how they can live purposeful lives. John, if you can, please speak to my audience, tell them how they can reach you. And super grateful, bro.
Yeah, well, one, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. For anyone listening, if you are a business owner, if you're a professional, I'd like to leave you with this one quick story, right? A lot of us remember the Nokia phones, right? The Nokia phones were the biggest things back in the
brick.
day. Everyone loved Nokia. And then what happened in 2007?
They went bankrupt?
Nope, iPhone came out.
Hey.
iPhones came out, and then very, very quickly after that, they lost a lot of market share, and next thing you know, they ended up being bought out by Microsoft. And one of the former CEOs, in the final one of his final speeches, he said, "We didn't do anything wrong, and yet somehow we still lost. We didn't do anything wrong, and yet somehow we still lost." So for anyone listening, I share that to you because that's where we are now with AI, right? What you're doing right now might have worked for us quite some time. I don't know how long you've been in business for, how long you've been in your career for, but now with AI, you got to get in front of it. Don't end up like Nokia. And so for anyone looking to get started using AI, all you got to do is go to stopandstare.media, stopandstare.media, and I have a weekly newsletter totally free where I give you actual nuggets to use AI in your life in 2 minutes or less. So literally, it's only a 2-minute read every Monday, and it's free. Stopandstare.media, and I'll catch you in my weekly newsletter.
All right. And you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I would be happy to connect you with John as well, or Claudio. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.